That isn't Sharon Salzberg, if you were a bit confused, but it's a fellow that's interviewing her.
Be with us today. New York Times best-selling author, a book called Real Happiness, and I mentioned Loving Kindness, and the soon-to-be released Real Love, which I'm really interested in hearing more about. That's going to be released on June 6th, and actually somewhere here on the conference website, you have the opportunity to pre-order that. So I would encourage you to do so. Sharon's books are absolutely fabulous. There's a thread that runs through the book, I think, is one of the ways that you're kind of describing love is at the root, it's about connection.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I had to define it, I would say connection. The word loving kindness is the common translation of this word metta, M-E-T-T-A, from Pali, and it's the translation I use, and virtually everybody uses, and it's fine. It's just that it's such an odd term. I mean, who sits down in a coffee shop in most places and, you know, talks about loving kindness? Not necessarily, but the literal translation is friendship, and I have some concern about that as well, because friendship, I think, implies like having dinner together, hanging out together, and the way I'm talking about love, it's a heart space. You know, it's not necessarily going to manifest in dinner, Thanksgiving, giving someone money, you know, saying yes, being sweet, any of those things. Mindfulness, I think, is at the core of all these skills, because especially mindfulness of our own assumptions, you know, to be aware of what we're feeling, not after we've blurted something out, not after we've sent the email, but as it's building, to be that in touch with ourselves, and to be able to see with some balance what's happening, so that we're not just swamped by the immediate reaction of the moment, and we're also not hating it and fearing it and trying to push it away. And that gives us the platform for insight. You know, is this an old tape that's re-arising in me, like no one could ever love me, I'm not worth anything? Or is this interesting information that I need to take in? And we can tell, I think, actually, if we're discerning, if we're really present. And we learn there's certain forces within ourselves we want to let go of, gently but clearly, and then there are others we want to nurture and really bring to life and feed in some way. So there's so much empowerment that comes from being aware of what's going on within.
Mm-hmm. Well, you spoke about some of those maybe inner tapes and voices that we might become aware of through mindfulness, and certainly I hope there are many young people in our audience. It's great to get these kind of teachings when you're young, when you're old as well, but you know, no matter how young someone is, even someone in their late teens, has already absorbed a lot of messages from their family, well-intended or unconscious, conscious, not so well-intended, what have you, and then from the media. I mean, just the messages about being okay, not being okay, being lovable, not being lovable, what love means, and there's so much confusion and so much potentially negative messaging that you know, how do we work with that to unscramble that, to even understand what does it mean, other than, you know, our romantic novels or those movies, you know, where what's the one where they're either going to meet on top of the New York State or not, and it doesn't happen, and then
oh no. Well, you know, I almost crafted the book based on this one line from a movie called Dan in Real Life, which was, I don't know, at this point maybe 12, 14 years old, something like that. Mm-hmm. And the line was, love is not a feeling, it's an ability. Mm-hmm. Love is not a feeling, it's an ability. And I love that, because I thought it really reflected one of my really strong insights when I was practicing intensively in Burma doing loving kindness meditation in the 80s. And like many insights that might be life-changing, I don't think it sounds like much in words necessarily, but it really was life-changing. And that was, I had some realization that prior to that time, I'd always thought of love as kind of like a commodity, and it was in someone else's hands to deliver unto me and thereby maybe take away from me. And if like the UPS person was standing on my doorstep with that package of love and they changed their mind and turned away, there would be no love in my life. I would be bereft. And there was just this recognition that, and that's not so. It's in me. It's mine. It's a capacity. It's an ability that exists within me, and certain people or situations or art or all kinds of things might awaken it and enliven it and nurture it or threaten it, but it's mine. It's inside me. And that was a huge turning point for me. And that's, in a way, in writing this book, I've actually looked back at other books I've written. I have the feeling that part of what motivates me is actually to help us reclaim words that I feel have somehow gotten distorted or disregarded in some way. Like I wrote a book called Faith, so you can imagine, like there was a lot of reaction to that, even amongst my friends. Like, are you kidding? But I didn't think the word needed to mean being silenced or not being able to ask questions or all those other associations. And just as you said, the word love has so many associations with it that I kind of wanted to pluck it back, and have it available for us in a much more powerful way.
So much of the challenges we face in our world today certainly has a lot to do with not enough connection, not enough love. And it seems like we're creating a world where connection is becoming more and more superficial. We're structuring a world where it seems like we're almost intentionally avoiding intimacy and connection. And, to be able to generate that quality within ourselves of feeling loved, of feeling worthy of love, and loving ourselves for that matter. From what I understand, that capacity has a lot to do with how much love we received as children, especially very early on, levels of successful attachment, early bonding with our parents and so forth. So for those of us who maybe didn't get as much unconditional love, didn't get as much strong attachment and bonding, obviously it's a bit more challenging. So is it your view that through these kind of practices like mindfulness and metta, that we can shift that for ourselves so we're more easily able to feel that?
I mean, I did it that way. And, some of it, of course, was my very close relationship with my teachers. Somebody asked me once about a particular teacher, this woman, Deepa Man, said to me very tentatively, do you think you maybe reparented yourself with her? And I said, I reparented myself with all of them. But it was also the practice, because I think we can do it through that mode. I was once on this panel, Richie Davidson was opening his new institute in Madison, Wisconsin. And I happened to be on a panel with the Dalai Lama and Matthew Ricard and the Dalai Lama's translator, Thupten Jinpa, and Barbara Fredrickson, who's a researcher in North Carolina, and Richie, and a couple of other people. And Barbara started presenting really what you had been talking about, that if we have had a close, affectionate relationship in our early childhood, it is so much easier to go forward and connect and feel close. And the Dalai Lama began speaking, as he often does, about his own mother and how she was his main teacher and taught him everything he knows about love and compassion. And I could feel the audience mood was just getting more and more and more depressed. So I raised my hand and I said, well, I didn't have such a happy childhood. And it was really funny. First, the Dalai Lama and his translator, it's like their mouths just went, oh, like, oh, I'm so sorry. And then I said, but I had very strong intention. I had a really strong intention to transform my life. I had a strong intention to be happier. And I utilized these practices. And I could feel the audience was like, oh, thank goodness.
There's hope for us.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's hard. We also have these models of perfection, like this, but not for us.
Yeah. It's hard to get away from, though. You mentioned love is not necessarily going out to dinner or hanging out or, I mean, I think if I'm honest, I still think if somebody loves me, they're going to want to hang out with me. Unfortunately, I kind of like hanging out myself these days. So that's okay. But, I guess if somebody's got their heart open to me from afar and they're doing love and kindness practice for me, that's good. I can use all I can get. But it's sort of like, feeling that. I mean, I guess what I'm really coming to myself is it's more and more paramount, it seems, to develop that inner capacity to generate love toward our own being and to feel that. Because if we're especially in today's world, if we're waiting around for all these busy people out there to confirm our okayness, and
Yeah.
to give us the experience of being loved, we're setting ourselves up.
Yeah, it's true. And I hadn't particularly thought about busyness as one of the culprits, but of course it is, so, and, the question of loving without liking necessarily comes up, because if we're trying to create a new worldview, where we don't feel so trapped in self and other and us and them, it's going to mean inclusion of people whose behavior we don't like and we don't approve of. And so that love, the development of that love, can possibly mean, in a sort of ethically correct world, we're going to give in, and we're just going to surrender all our principles for the sake of having company at dinner. It's not going to be like that. So there's a kind of resistance or struggle that may be happening in terms of the stand we take against people's actions, but within ourselves, we don't have to be motivated by hatred, in this huge sense of disconnection. That's hard, that is not 101, that's definitely the advanced course, but I've seen that it's possible.
When I was thinking about your book this morning, I also was thinking about that quote from Martin Luther King. I'll paraphrase it. I don't know it exactly, but something about that, about power and love, and that love without power is somewhat anemic and weak, and then power without love can become destructive. And so in terms of, all the challenges we face today, it seems like it's pretty important to figure out what this love thing is beyond just this, maybe these romantic notions of love or these very conditional notions of love.
Yeah, well, they say, as I'm sure you know, the Buddha taught loving kindness meditation as the antidote to fear.
Mm-hmm.
And so when people, talk to me and they say, I don't know about, trying to cultivate a sense of love, because in so many people's minds, it means weakness or giving in or being saccharine or sentimental. I want to be strong. And I said, well, if you cast love as the antidote to fear, how would that feel? So then we like it, it's like, because then we understand, of course, when you're not so afraid, there's a kind of generosity of the spirit that can happen. Not that you become stupid and you lose your sense of right and wrong or principles or whatever, but we find ourselves in others so much more when we really listen, when we're really present, when we pay attention. And so I think the strongest determinant of love is attention. It's actually it's being mindful, it's being aware.
It seems like, and on one end you're saying it seems like there's an assumption there that if we're not able to love ourselves and experience some sense of lovable or worthiness, self-worth, and lovability internally, it's going to be kind of hard to love others and really express genuine love to others or have genuine connection with others. Or it's going to be a very quid pro quo thing. I'll love you if you love me kind of thing. Well, what's the difference between self-love and, selfishness or even narcissism?
Yeah, I think they're the opposite, actually, because I think narcissism is more a sense of inner bleakness, and so there's this continual effort to sort of either avoid the terrible feeling of the bleakness and the hollowness or to change it, to fill it, to disguise it. And self-love is the force that allows generosity. It's like, also in the Buddhist teaching, they say the best kind of generosity comes from a sense of inner abundance, right? Or even inner sufficiency, because you could have a massive amount externally, but not at all have the inner feeling you have enough, and it's so hard to give.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean just material generosity, to pay attention to somebody, to care about somebody, to listen to their story, to smile, to thank somebody, when they've just done you a good deed. It needs to have some wherewithal inside, some sense of resource. Because if you're exhausted, you feel depleted, you feel overcome, you feel shattered, there's not the wherewithal inside to really, care about somebody. It's like you're so tired and this person comes up to tell you their story and you're like, oh my God, just go away inside, even if you don't show it. I think that sense of inner sufficiency, of wholeness, is going to allow love for others in a sustained way over time. I'm sort of in this debate with this one Bell Hooks, and who said she thought you couldn't really love others without loving yourself first, that you could care for others, but not really love them. And I said, I wasn't sure, as I said in the book, I'm not really sure I agree with that. I think I know people who do love others, but not themselves, but then they crash, So I think it's a pretty time-limited option.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, it's kind of one of the, and again, I hope we have a lot of people in our audience that are just exploring the mindfulness and these paths and so forth. And it seems like one of the seeming conundrums of spiritual paths altogether is, on the one hand, we're not happy or we're not satisfied with our lives, and so we're looking for something. And we think if we just maybe focus more on ourselves and take time for ourselves and get inner focused, it'll make us happier. But there's a lot to point to that can actually make us unhappier. And then we also hear about, well, you should just forget the self and focus on the world outside if you want to be happier. And there's two things going on. And it can all get kind of confusing.
Yeah.
Especially when fundamentally, I just want to be happy.
Yeah.
I don't want people to like me.
I hope you will be happy. Yeah, I mean, I think, it depends on how you focus on yourself, which is why it's a tremendous thing to have skilled guidance.
Mm-hmm.
Because it is certainly possible. I mean, I went to India when I was 18, speaking of late teenagehood, because I was suffering so much, and I really wanted to find a practical way to feel better. And I heard about a path, that included meditation, but I didn't see it. It was a long time ago. I was 18. I didn't see it where it was, and I went to India, to find it. And it would have been very possible, as I began, to judge myself ruthlessly about the things I was discovering inside, because introspection was pretty new for me. Mm-hmm. And it was because of my community of friends, who many of whom 45 years later are still my closest friends, and those teachers who were perpetually laughing at me, when I would say, I'm like the worst person that ever lived or whatever. I'm angry. I never used to be angry before I started meditating, and they would laugh, and I'd go, oh, maybe not. Maybe I was angry. I just didn't see it before. And who created an environment of loving kindness, so that more and more I could see these things within me, understand it wasn't all that I was, it was impermanent, and that it was good within me, and that the very act of being aware was a good thing, and so on. And then, everything shifted from that.
And, I think also it's a question of intention. Like, are we focusing on ourselves in order to connect more deeply with others and with life? And then do we have the guidance to do it in a way that we don't end up just making ourselves unhappy in the process?
Yeah.
Maybe this will be a good time just to have you lead us in a practice.
Sure.
That would be wonderful.
Sangamita, I'm thinking maybe what we should do before we have a discussion is just maybe get everybody to say hello and see where everyone's from this morning.